Activision have just shut down one of the most highly anticipated Call of Duty modding projects I've seen in years. And so today, I'm going to use this whiteboard pen and this whiteboard to explain all of the context so that you're caught up and explain why people are so furious about this. If you're new here, I'm Milo. I'm a no-nonsense kind of guy. I try and tell it like it is. We're going to do exactly that today. So let's get into it. First of all, what is this thing that I've got up here written down as the H2 multiplayer mod, or H2M? Like, what is that? The relevant context you need here is that this mod has been in development for a very long time. It's been a huge undertaking for community modders who've been doing this of their own free will, of their own volition. And what it did is it worked in conjunction with Modern Warfare Reloaded, which is obviously an Activision-owned official Call of Duty game. So you can go on Steam right now, you can buy Modern Warfare Reloaded, and it's Modern Warfare from when? 2008 or something like that? 2007. But it's the remastered versions, so it's updated graphics and all that cool stuff. And this mod basically attached to that game. So you could not play this H2 multiplayer thing without Modern Warfare Reloaded. That was a prerequisite. You had to own the Activision product to be able to play. That's an important detail. So you're probably then wondering, what's in the mod? Like, why would I care, right? Well, the mod brought back a lot of classic stuff from games that are very nostalgic for much of the Call of Duty player base. So, for instance, original maps from Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 2 weapons, perks, attachments, like everything essentially that was a necessary component of that multiplayer experience. It brought that back for people to enjoy on the classic Modern Warfare 2 maps, don't get me wrong, but then also I believe, and I didn't actually get a chance to play it myself, but I believe on some further maps on top of that as well, as an extra offering. But obviously the key detail here is that it did all this in a modernized engine. It did all this with all of the fancy graphics that we expect from Call of Duty nowadays, as opposed to what you might remember from back in the day, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, that kind of era. Now, obviously, this is the sort of thing that you can probably imagine the Call of Duty community was pretty damn excited about. The chance to revitalize Modern Warfare 2 and tap back into that absolutely adored multiplayer experience, huge. And content creators over the last couple of days have actually been able to start getting their hands on with the mod and testing it out and posting gameplays and having a really great time. Now, alongside all that, while this hype has been building and building over the last few days, weeks, and months, something interesting has happened. Specifically, Modern Warfare Remastered, which you need to own in order to be able to use the H2M mod, that has been on sale on Steam. That's interesting. When do you think it was on sale until? Just take a guess. I'm going to tell you right now for the sake of this video's retention. It was on sale until August 15th. That, funnily enough, is today's date. And when do you reckon, if you just had to guess, that the H2M mod was going to come out? When was the official release date for the mod, the public release? Yeah, that was actually August 16th. So straight away, you're probably starting to see why there's some controversy around this, right? This requires you to own Modern Warfare Remastered. Modern Warfare Remastered has been on sale until today, and as soon as the sale ends, Activision is like, lol, we're also not going to let you release the game. So all of the sales that have been generated by people that were excited to play this tomorrow suddenly are not able to play this tomorrow because the entire project has been shut down by Activision. So you might wonder, well, I mean, did the hype around it even make a difference, right? Like, did it end up popular in the sale? Like, was that something that Activision were actually profiting off? Or is this just like a small drop in the ocean? Nobody actually cares about it that much, and so it wasn't driving sales. Well, if you look at the Steam charts and you look at what's been the most popular sales on Steam in the last couple of weeks, you'll notice that in the top 5, actually, I think it peaked at number 3, was Modern Warfare Remastered. The exact game that you need in order to play the mod. Why would that be in the top 100 if the mod itself wasn't generating some interest? Why would it be in the top 5? I think it's obvious what the answer is to that. It's that the mod was generating a crazy amount of interest, like a huge, huge amount. And so Activision, with seemingly profiting off of the mod's excitement and the mod's success while this sale was on. Like the sale dates seem to indicate that they even knew exactly when this was happening, and they wanted to sort of time it to fit the release of the game. But as we know, as I said at the start of the video here, it's been cease and desisted. And it's been cease and desisted on the evening of the 15th, just before they were about to hit their public release. Now, there is a broad range, a very broad range of responses to this. Some people saying this is necessary from a legal perspective. Others saying, it's more complicated than that. Others saying, I hate Activision, like burn them to the ground, like very much just hating the fact that Activision even exists in the first place, right? And I want to be fair here, and I want to cover all of the bases to give you guys a comprehensive understanding of what the actual truth is behind what's happened and what could have happened had Activision decided to act in a different way. Because it's not as simple as I think many of you guys think it is. So, the first thing I'd like to introduce to the conversation is actually a quote from an ex-Call of Duty staff member, ex-Activision staff, Robert Bowling. Many of you will remember Robert Bowling was the community manager for Modern Warfare 2 back in the day, famous for his stealth clown appearance in that DLC video. And Robert Bowling said the following. He said that companies should build systems to help your UGC community, not strangle it. And the full quote talks about how a lot of the original Infinity Ward team back in the day who made Modern Warfare 2 were themselves modders. Like that was their background. And he mentioned how the original Call of Duty PC games released mod tools so that you could empower community creations and expand on that original vision. Like that was part of the DNA way back when. But nowadays, it's much more this model of strangulation, and he was sort of condemning that. Now, to be fair, okay, I seek balance in the way that I present things. It is worth noting, Robert Bowling is biased, because Robert Bowling is making a blockchain-enabled game where the idea of community creations is very important, and so he's kind of talking his shop here a little bit. He's kind of talking up the stuff that he's actually directly working on and talking down on his old competitor that he no longer works for, which is kind of to be expected from someone in that position, right? So we shouldn't entirely defer to Robert Bowling's opinion here and his perspective, but it is interesting that an ex-COD dev seems to feel that there is an alternative path available. Now, also, while we're on the topic of balance and fairness, there do seem to be some rumblings that Call of Duty is at least kind of considering the idea of releasing community tools at some point. I saw a tweet earlier today, and I'm going to be honest, I haven't checked whether this is true or not, but basically Infinity Ward Poland, a sort of splinter studio from the main Infinity Ward studio, and Treyarch might potentially actually be developing their own community mapping tools of some kind right now. Like there seems to be some rumblings of that, there seems to be some conversation about it, some potential leaks of that, stuff like that. But what I can personally confirm, having just been to the Treyarch studio a matter of weeks ago now, is that I asked at Treyarch whether we were going to get mod tools for Black Ops 6, and they were like, do you know how much work it takes to bundle tools up and release them to the community? And they sort of did that. They didn't give me a no, because I guess they didn't want that to be on the record, but they basically went. So I think that the chances that whatever is being developed here is released anytime soon, let's call it 1%. I think that it's basically near zero. So separate to ex-COD devs, obviously the COD community has a lot to say about this as well. As you'd expect, people are really upset. They've been so excited for all of this stuff that they love, and they're really frustrated by the fact that Activision not only has cease and desisted the project, but cease and desisted it so close to its release. Like that feels mean. It feels vicious almost. And there are a few kind of perspectives that I want to share here. First of all, I want to just call someone out real quick. I'm gonna censor who they are here. I'm not trying to like send a hate brigade their way, but I want to call something out real quick. Yesterday, literally 24 hours ago, I made a video saying I just got invited to Treyarch for the first time in 5 years, and so naturally there's some bias that's going to come with that, where I'm in the Activision fold a little bit more now, and so I'm going to need to be cognizant of the fact that I'm being plied with access to things on the Activision sort of front, while also wanting to maintain my integrity to my audience, right? And so I said in the video, I want to reassure you guys, I'm still going to be as straight as I can with you all and try and tell it like it is, right? And I predicted that there would be people that would come for my neck for no reason, just because I started receiving invites to Treyarch events and COD events and stuff like that. I knew that that was going to happen. Anytime I'm positive about the game, they'll say, yeah, I'm just shilling it to maintain my relationship with Activision. That accusation will be leveled at me now, I'm sure, many times over the following 12 months. 24 hours ago, I predicted this, and what happens today? Well, this news came out, and I got my whiteboard pens, and I started working on what I needed to work on, and within, I don't know, 20 minutes or something of the announcement happening that the cease and desist had been released, I start getting called out in my Twitter mentions for supposedly not having any decency to genuinely speak on things. Well, why? Why are we like this? Like, internet, you can do better. You can do better. I am not able to make one of these videos in 4 minutes. Just so you're aware, takes a little longer than that. It's insane, man. The fact that I knew it was coming and it happened like clockwork that fast, like, come on. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about community reactions here. So first up, we've got team members, right? Folks that are actually working on the mod saying, our team has received the cease and desist. We're complaining. We're shutting everything down. We've got Watchful Wolf here saying, I'm sorry. Like, there's definitely a real feeling of sadness within that team, and I don't blame them. I mean, to put all this work in and then have it just disappear seconds from release, like, that's got to sting. You got Tactical Brit here being like, yeah, this is Activision whenever something looks pretty cool and it engages a part of the community that Activision themselves kind of underserve. You got Modern Warzone here being like, I'm sad that they've taken down yet another mod, but you can't be surprised. It's obvious that Call of Duty wants to protect its IP as a whole, and more specifically Modern Warfare 2 MP, to be able to potentially sell it for themselves in the future. Saw Zelta says that it's super messed up that BO3 mods are allowed to be a thing, but Modern Warfare 2 Remastered gets a little too popular and then it gets instantly shut down. Hidden Xperia here from the Halo side of things says this is yet another reason to hate Activision. Ghost of Hope here says Activision knew this was in development and they didn't cease and desist it, and they waited till a day before launch and then they did, and it's insanely evil. And then other folks like Reality are just being like, just refund the game. Like, everyone was buying Modern Warfare Reloaded for this exact reason. I keep calling it Reloaded. Is it Reloaded? Remastered? I can't remember, bro. But whatever it is, MWR, right? There's been a lot of sales of that. Refund them all. If you've played the game for less than 2 hours, you can refund it. And then last two, Calais here, I don't actually know how to pronounce your name, I'm sorry, but Calais said, they make no money off this mod. You gotta buy the game, and Activision got to pocket off that. And so all this mod did is it supported older CODs on newer servers and brought back nostalgia. And so it's obviously so disappointing that this has happened, but it's also not surprising. And then finally, Envy here says, this sucks, but I kept telling people, you're technically playing a pirated version of Modern Warfare 2, just on a different game, on a different engine. And so as much as I would have loved to be hopeful that this could have lasted, it's Activision property at the end of the day, and they can do what they want with it. So what is the truth, right? I feel like we just went through a whole spectrum of viewpoints, from this just sucks and Activision is trash, through to ultimately, this is kind of what we should have all seen coming originally. So the question is it something we should have all seen coming originally? And maybe more importantly, does Activision have to do this? Like, is this what they are legally not so much entitled to do, but like driven to do? Like, are they forced into a corner here? Do they have to behave this way? And I think it's worth having a quick history lesson in order to really answer that question. You see, as things stand, if you are an IP owner, right, you own some kind of intellectual property in the United States, let's say, and you actively do not protect that IP, then there becomes legal risk for there to be precedent for other people to use your IP and for it to essentially no longer be something that you have as clear a legal claim to. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to pretend that I know exactly how IP law works in and out, but I do know that any company that doesn't protect its intellectual property, doesn't actively enforce the rules around its intellectual property, is opening itself up to risk where other people can say, well, you haven't enforced your IP sort of ownership and protection and stuff like that in this instance, so surely that sets a precedent where I could similarly use it myself in another instance, and for that legally to maybe be more passable. And Call of Duty wants to be able to protect its IP with as much vigor and strength as it can, and so it might want to shut something like this down so that a precedent isn't set that, yeah, Call of Duty can just be modded by anybody, sure. Like, you don't need a license, you don't need permission, you can just do it. Like, that's something that Call of Duty is obviously very scared of, because if it gets into the wrong hands, if somebody starts making stuff that is like really copyright infringing for other companies, or really disrespectful or really hateful, or who knows, then that could look really bad for Activision as well, right? So there's that element to it. And there is, as Envy pointed out, also the element that if they don't prevent people from basically playing a new version of Modern Warfare 2 now, and they just let the internet run rampant with that, it means that in, let's say, 2 years' time, if they want to release Modern Warfare 2 remastered, like anniversary edition or some crap like that, then they've kind of already had all of the public playing a free version for the last couple of years, and so the likelihood of sales on the new version is very low, and that would totally mess up the entire Call of Duty kind of cycle. Like, that would be a real massive impact on their sales. That's hundreds of million to billions of dollars that's just disappeared in the blink of an eye because the community wanted this and Activision just sort of let it slip by them. Like, those are the sort of implications for if they don't act here. However, that is just one side of the coin, right? I'm not saying that that is the side of the coin. There's an alternative path. So let's talk history. Back during the early days of the 2000s, let's say, there were a lot of video game mods which became integral to massive intellectual properties that are huge to this day. An example I can give you off the top of my head is Counter-Strike, right? Counter-Strike is a very easy example to give because it was originally a mod. It was not its own game that just appeared out of nowhere as its own intellectual property. It was a mod for Half-Life, and Half-Life was built on a modded version of the Quake engine. And you have this whole story at this time, and I literally have a documentary that I'm working on right now about the origins of like Call of Duty modding. It'll be out another day. Like, it's still got a lot of work left on it. But a lot of the origins of games at the time was that you basically had this underlying engine, let's say, and then someone would build something on that engine, and then somebody else would mod something, like Counter-Strike would be a modded version of Half-Life, that would then be acquired by Valve and turned into its own IP, because instead of just shutting it down and cease and desisting it, they were like, let's empower you here and actually bring you into our team and make you an official part of our offering. Similar thing happened with Day of Defeat. And another example actually is League of Legends. League of Legends wouldn't exist without mods. Like, categorically, it would not exist because League is very much inspired by and built on the shoulders of Dota, right? Dota 2. And Dota wouldn't exist if modding were not a thing because it's a mod. It started out its life as a mod of Warcraft 3. And it's the same situation. Valve then acquired the mod, turned it into its own big, massive deal, and it became one of the most popular video games of all time, and then inspired League of Legends, another one of the most popular video games of all time. So mods, historically, like, they've had a big part to play in just the life cycle of video games and our industry overall. And so when Robert Bowling says, build systems to help your UGC community, not strangle it, that's the sort of ethos that Valve had back in the day, back in those early days. That's the sort of ethos that allowed for the modification of the Quake engine and the modification of the Half-Life SDK and all those sorts of things that meant that all these cool products could spawn from that melting pot of ideas. And so if we fast forward a little bit into the future, we have Call of Duty coming about in the early 2000s, right? And eventually we get to COD 4. COD 4, smash hit, incredibly successful, very, very popular for Call of Duty, put it on the map in a new way compared to the previous Call of Duty games. Like, it just smashed its sales records. And then this weird thing happened where Pro Mod started getting popular. It was this alternate version of COD MP, which had a very, very different feel, and it started gaining a lot of traction in the COD competitive scene. And also was sort of intertwined with some of the origins of Call of Duty YouTube videos as well. And COD YouTube videos kind of predated a lot of other gaming YouTube videos. Like, it really started in some respects with Call of Duty commentaries, with the OG folks from way back in the day, 2007, 8, 9, that kind of time period. I actually am an old fart. I started my channel in 2009. My channel's 15 years old. And even I was not at the very, very beginning of everything, because there were folks like, I don't know, Fuzzers and Blame Truths and ZZIR Grizz and like folks even before them, I'm sure, that were really doing that from sort of day one. Anyway, I'm going on a little tangent here. COD 4 Pro Mod was getting big and gaining traction in the same era that stuff was all starting to bubble and grow and be born. And Activision made a pretty key choice back in the day. They made a pretty massive kind of decision when they made the call not to officially support Pro Mod, not to acquire the team, and actually to just cruise on by, and instead to only ever release its own mod tools a few more times, World at War, and then what, Black Ops 3, and I think that was it after that. And outside of that, they've completely shunned the modding community. Like, there's been very little support for Call of Duty modding outside of the tools releases for those games. That's been a very calculated decision by Activision, because they basically said, you know what, we think we can make more money if we own the means of production here, if we have complete control over everything, and we shut out the community creativity that might be possible with UGC, that's user-generated content. I don't think I specified that before, and any kind of mods and custom maps and things like that that the community might want to build. And it's been tragic, I think, to see that happen over the years, because the small little slithers that we have had of really cool modding moments, such as the World at War Zombies mod tools, which is what my documentary is about, and Black Ops 3 Zombies mod tools, which is a huge bubbling community. Like, it's incredible how powerful the maps are that the community makes just from those tools alone. And Black Ops 3 is like nearly 10 years old at this point now. But regardless of all that, Call of Duty's ultimate decision has been, we do not support community modding. Like, we've just moved away from that. And so when Robert Bowling here says you should build tools to help your community, what Robert really, I think, is sort of referring to in some ways is this old view, this old industry potential, right? The other teams tapped as well. Bungie tapped it incredibly well with Forge. Left 4 Dead tapped it incredibly well with obviously all the potential for Left 4 Dead custom maps. But it's this old sort of sentiment that if you work with your community and you empower community creations, you can actually build something infinitely larger than the finite creation potential that you have with just the folks that are inside the studios themselves. Like, there is an infinitely higher ceiling when you have a potentially infinite pool of people all working to create UGC for your games. And that starts with supporting people doing the most polished work. That starts with acquiring the studios or acquiring the indie groups or whoever that are doing the most incredible stuff, such as H2M. And it's something which Activision has consistently for years said, no, we will not do it. So I've presented like a reason why they might want to chase these things down and shut these things down. I've also presented some reasons why maybe there's a better world out there, like a world with less immediate corporate greed driving these decisions, and instead one that promotes creativity within this kind of sandbox and finds ways to make it legally viable instead of just hitting that first tripwire and going, nope, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. But what I haven't talked about just yet is how potentially mean their approach has been in making the decision to shut this down. You see, if we assume Activision just has to protect its IP no matter what, right? If we make that assumption, a question that I would pose, and maybe a lawyer can answer this for me, and maybe my sort of conspiracy theorization here is all just bogus, right? Maybe. But if you have to shut a project down, right? If you know that ultimately you are not going to say yes to any community mods or any community projects like this ever, right? If that's company policy, why wait until 24 hours before it releases to tell them? Why do that? Like, doesn't that seem vindictive? Doesn't it also seem underhanded to run a sale on the game that they were building on top of? Does that not seem somewhat sort of sneaky? Does it not seem like there's some kind of almost like backroom kind of evil rubbing of the hands going on there where they're like, well, we know we're going to shut them down, but let's squeeze every last little drop out of them that we possibly can while it's not shut down because we can put a sale on and milk our community for a little bit more money just before we send that cease and desist. Like, does that not seem a bit slimy? And like, my own personal stance here, to be completely honest, is that, like, it's not simple, right? There's a huge number of factors here. Call of Duty is a massive organization, Activision an even bigger organization, and there's a lot of decisions that end up getting made that I don't understand because I'm not in a legal meeting for 3 straight weeks trying to decide what is and isn't okay in a certain territory with a certain jurisdiction's rules. And like I recognize I don't have the full picture. I really believe that I can never know the full extent as to the decision making that's going on here. But even so, I can look at the individual small scale decision making that's happened in the way that they've rolled out this choice, basically. And I can say, yeah, I think that it would be really cool, rather than cease and desisting them and waiting until the very end of things, to instead try and foster some kind of positive community sentiment with the modders instead of something negative. Like, this is a PR crisis that I feel like they've brought upon themselves, which actually is really avoidable. And I just don't see why they've chosen to go about it in what would be perceived as the most aggressively mean way. Like, surely your legal team would rather that you send this cease and desist 6 months ago, right? Like, wouldn't that make more sense? Or is it just that you're kind of trying to waste the time of the people that are doing this? What other reason could there be? Are you just trying to squeeze money out of the sale through this marketing beat that you're then going to shut down immediately afterwards? Like, which of the things is it? And like I said, I don't know, but I can at least say that this is surely setting themselves up for a loss of community trust more than is necessary. Like, I think that there's another path here where this is sort of the same ultimate result if it's legally necessary for them to do this, but just done in a way that makes them come off as a bit less of a dick. Should the H2M team have seen this coming? Probably. They probably should have known that without a license, right, without a thumbs up from Activision, you should assume that it's a no. Right? Like, that's just ultimately the way that these things work. That's basic sort of IP theft versus permission. Like, that's the assumption that you've got to make. So my own personal stance is like, yeah, this was always going to happen. And yeah, this is essentially like pirated versions of the assets that are being used to recreate these Modern Warfare 2 maps. Like, that's essentially what's going on. There is pirating of Call of Duty assets happening there. But my own personal feeling is like, when the community is doing something awesome, I would love just one time to see Activision take the decision, like make the choice to empower instead of sort of just stamp it out with its boot. Like, I know everyone will just say, oh, well, it's their IP, they can do what they want. And I know that, but it being their IP, again, doesn't mean that they need to do this stuff that's going to make such a big PR nightmare for them. And as someone that has worked with Activision over the years and has had cool ideas, I'm going to be careful with my wording here, has cool ideas about stuff, like cool aspirations for things that he wants to do. Maybe there's a story I can tell. I once, can I tell this story? I once did a thing. Okay, well, I'm going to be very ambiguous, but I once did a thing for the zombies community that was really cool. And right before I was about to sort of release it, it was like something I'd worked on for a really long time. Activision were basically like, you can't do it. Nope, not allowed to do that at all. And I was like, this doesn't use any COD assets. This is not something which has anything in it really that is not owned by me. Like, this is separate. But they were still like, not happening. Nope, we are not giving the thumbs up for this. And it's like, having been in scenarios like that, and this is not just something that's happened only like 10 years ago, like it's a more modern thing as well, to be trying to be a creative in a sandbox and do cool stuff around this IP, much of which does support the IP, much of which drives massive amounts of sales to the IP, and then to kind of get like slaps on the wrist or to get cease and desists and those sorts of things. As much as there is legal precedent there, as much as that is fine from a legal perspective, and I understand that, it also just sucks as a creative because I know that other companies out there don't behave that way. Like, some other companies out there see those cool ideas and go, how can we double down on supporting that, right? How can we make that lead somewhere that's mutually beneficial? And it feels like quite consistently, Activision doesn't take that road, and that's what upsets me about all this. So I'm sure many of you are more angry than I am. I'm sure that others of you think that this is a non-issue and that actually Activision did exactly what they should have done here. But regardless, hopefully my little breakdown has helped give you some clarity as to the overall conversation. And of course, if you've enjoyed the video and you'd like to see more breakdowns like this with a whiteboard in future, then please remember to subscribe. I'll talk to you all soon.